Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Trump's executive orders facing court battles with filings with liberal judges in blue states. A federal district judge in New York, of course, has issued an ex parte restraining order to block all political appointees from accessing Treasury Administration records. Note that ex parte means nobody from the Trump administration was given a chance to appear and respond. This, of course, is based on the Dems' hysteria about Musk and his buddies looking for wasteful spending. The Trump administration has filed an emergency motion to vacate the injunction. The judge's order was that only civil servants could access these records. Note that the Treasury Secretary himself is a political appointee. Trump's legal argument is that Article 2 of the United States Constitution establishes the executive branch of the government and the role of the president. The judge may be interfering with the president's right to supervise the executive branch, including all political appointed leaders within the Treasury Department. Now, a highly publicized fight is about USAID. The agency was set up with the intention of making America look good on the international stage by showing our capitalist kindness relative to our dirty commies on the other side, feeding people and helping them get clean water and health care. What a fine objective. Naturally, that is not what is happening today. Much of the aid is intended for the poor that is going to tribal leaders and gangsters, not that needy population. This is just a fact. Further, there's been some extensive publicity recently of some of the most pathetic uses of our tax dollars around the world that's not being used for food and healthcare and things like that for the truly needy. And that's a false narrative for sure. At least the bulk of the aid is not being used for the way it's being sold to the public. So Trump has been sued for putting a total hold on USAID until things are straightened out. Various employee unions and some non-governmental organizations have sued to keep flushing your tax dollars down the nearest toilet. Most of the judges who have ruled against Trump are in blue states and were appointed by Dem presidents. No surprise there. I'm sensitive to one issue. If you work for USAID and your job stops while you're overseas, you do need to be shipped back to the United States. That is only fair. Now, some are complaining because their kids are in school and that'll interrupt their schooling. Hey, you know what? Tough. You chose to accept an overseas assignment while having young children at home. I was a product of a military family. We moved when the Department of Defense told us to move. Just the nature of that type of government employment. So grow up or get out. Paired with this information, a judge has blocked Trump's deportation plan with regard to shipping to Gitmo criminal illegals who cannot be returned to their home countries. I actually proposed this plan some time ago. Glad to see others are on my wavelength. There is unfortunately, a court precedent that supports the judge's opinion. I believe the precedent is plain wrong and that hopefully the Trump administration will get a quick appellate court review and get this reversed. It seems to me that anyone here illegally has no right to access the already overburdened U.S. legal system. Gitmo is a perfect place as far as I'm concerned. And hey, it's in the Caribbean. It's sunny. What more do they need to complain about, huh, folks? Billions in unemployment benefits have been stolen. Work and Welfare Chairman LaHood's opening statement, here are some quotes. All told, for the unemployment insurance program alone, GAO has estimated between $100 and $135 billion, billion with a B, was lost to fraud during the pandemic. That number is astounding from my standpoint. Even more concerning, the Department of Labor tells us that only $5 billion has been recovered. Meanwhile, we know law enforcement agencies have thousands of cases pending. The Department of Justice has charged more than 600 criminal unemployment cases associated with losses of over $300 million, a mere drop in the bucket so far. As of January 28th of this year, Department of Justice reports that more than 1,600 criminal matters remain open and as yet to be charged. Apparently, the statute of limitations is only 5 years, and that will soon expire. Chairman LaHood has asked for a 5-year extension to go after these thieves. I want to know why the thievery took place at all. This is underscoring the importance of examining what the government does and what these bureaucrats are doing. It sounds like they're throwing our money away. Keep in mind, the Biden Justice Department was happy to engage in lawfare against Trump and his cronies, happy to chase parents protesting woke policies at school board meetings, and even chasing down old ladies who are protesting outside abortion clinics. Yes, these folks should get fired, and the people who justify receiving our tax dollars get involved and restore justice to the American taxpayers. This has to stop in terms of the waste, and we've got to start prosecuting those who take advantage of the system. And I call for long jail terms and maybe in some cases even my preferred remedy, the death penalty. Trump states that both Russia and Ukraine have agreed to immediate negotiations to end the war. Trump had a 90-minute call with Putin. The two actually agreed to visit each other's countries. Given that I regard Putin as an outright war criminal, I'm not happy with that in either direction. Remember, this is the guy who jails and kills his adversaries. I would recommend meeting in Switzerland. We're not sure what Zelensky or Putin is willing to do. I'm a hardcore anti-communist and worried that this negotiation will help Russia and hurt Ukraine. Trump has a team under the leadership of new Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I know I want the sovereign nation of Ukraine to be able to join NATO. I also know that the new Department of Defense head, Pete Hegseth, does not see Ukraine being able to join NATO. That does not please me. In terms of military value, the Trump administration is also considering a deal with Ukraine to gain access to rare earth minerals in exchange for continued American support. I think we should be getting something back. But how does that happen without American forces in Ukraine to help to protect it from Putin? In what appears to be a related note, I am glad to see that the Trump administration arranged the release of American Mark Fogel, who's been held since 2021 by the Russian commies. This man should have been returned before basketball player and anti-American Brittany Griner. Yet another failure by the Biden administration that has been addressed by the Trump administration. The Gaza ceasefire deal is in shreds. As I said previously, the recent Gaza ceasefire deal stinks. First, they exchanged too many of the murderers in Israeli jails for the few hostages recovered. Second, even more revolting, the 3 most recent hostages looked emaciated, reminiscent of the photos of the survivors at the Nazi concentration camps. I doubt the other hostages will be alive much longer, if not dead already. But talk about stupid. Hamas has now tried to back out of the ceasefire and has stopped returning the few hostages that they promised to return. Both Trump and Israel have given Hamas a short time to get back on the deal or get extensive military forces focused on them beyond what anyone has seen to date. Frankly, folks, that is my preferred outcome here. It's time to completely destroy Hamas. Regarding Gaza, Trump has been speaking to neighboring countries about helping out on the humanitarian end to get some of the civilians out. Part of the problem is there's no way to separate civilians from terrorists. No rational country wants Hamas. Further, those who have cooperated and supported Hamas would make lousy new residents. $59 million of FEMA money was sent to house illegals in New York City. Fascinating that the Dems are ripping out their hair over Elon Musk pursuing government efficiency. This further proves how out of touch they are with the overtaxed and underserved Americans. Note that FEMA has denied that any of its funds were sent to illegals. This would be a crime in any event, but even worse, that we have people in North Carolina who are suffering and FEMA has failed to serve those people, those good, hardworking Americans. This situation underscores the need for executive branch to reel in the out-of-control spending by numerous federal agencies. Every tax dollar paid in and then every possible dollar that could be borrowed has simply provided the means for the Dems to use taxpayer money to buy votes. The end of that is now. A former Federal Reserve advisor is indicted in a Chinese espionage scheme. Gee, what a surprise. This is indeed a disturbing situation. Federal prosecutors have charged 63-year-old John Harold Rogers with economic espionage and making false statements after uncovering his ties to Chinese intelligence operatives. He was from 2010 to 2021 a senior advisor to the Federal Reserve. The allegations are that he was stealing sensitive financial data for the Chi-Coms. In an interesting twist, he supposedly did this in 2018 while a visiting professor at a Chinese university. The Justice Department stated that Rogers was paid approximately $450,000 for selling out his country. Another store closing announced. A staple headline of our recent Saving America reporting has been store closings. Sadly, another to report. We've already mentioned Big Lots liquidating in bankruptcy. Many dollar stores have already closed. Some of the big chains have announced large numbers of store closings. A chain I'd not heard of, Bargain Hunt, is closing all 91 stores by next month. A quick business note. Trump has announced that he ordered the U.S. Mint to stop making pennies. This is a move that is long overdue, although it does put a bow on the fact that we've experienced inflation for quite a while. Neighboring Canada stopped using pennies about a decade ago. In my last visit there, I found it was a perfectly reasonable move and there was really no inconvenience. Wonder if the Dems will soon block this as well. This would be funny if it were not so sad. A whack job liberal state rep from Michigan claims that she had sterilization surgery to be sure she would not get pregnant while Trump was president. This was announced by 36-year-old Lori Pohutsky, a ridiculous statement attributed to her. I refuse to let my body be treated as currency by an administration that only sees value in my ability to procreate. What? Given the many high-level female appointments by the Trump administration already, I'm not sure exactly what her problem is. After all, a child born in 2026 would only live under a Trump presidency for a couple years. So this was a nonsense deal to get publicity, not because of anything legitimate. I hope there are enough residents of her district that can read and write that she is voted out of office in the next election. And our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Saving America welcomes Ken Peterson. He has more than 30 years of experience developing and implementing enterprise risk management and human resource consulting solutions. Peterson founded Churchill and Harriman C&H in 1986. Since 1997, C&H has developed and implemented enterprise risk management and third-party risk management solutions for large enterprises. C&H helps clients select and implement controls, processes, and tools that identify, measure, and manage enterprise risk. Under Peterson's leadership, C&H advises clients on enterprise risk strategy in healthcare and financial services, as well as helping government agencies improve critical infrastructure. C&H also serves Fortune 100 clients in healthcare, defense, entertainment, finance, insurance, life sciences, manufacturing, mobile commerce, technology, and transportation. C&H is an assessment firm member of the Shared Assessments Program. Peterson is an active leader in the international standards community. C&H earned the distinction of being the first approved ISO 27001 and ISO 22301 associate consultancy by a leading global registrar. We welcome Ken Peterson for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you, Dave.
Just like I said, sometimes I have to cut these bios a little bit so we'll have time to ask the questions and all that. But what a great background, and it's our pleasure to have you here. Our first, as you know, we ask our guests 3 questions. Explain to our audience why firms need to identify, measure, and manage enterprise cybersecurity risk.
Well, there are a number of very formal reasons in answering that questions, Dave. Number one, industry and government require that firms identify, measure, and manage their risks now. It's simply a matter of the depth and breadth that an individual industry or a public entity has to do so. And increasingly, organizations at the board level are required through public filings and through their investor relations functions to produce the outputs of the identification, the mitigation, and the listing of those formal risks when they go through these annual processes. So there's a very formal reason for doing so. Another reason for doing so, Dave, is that particularly at a time like this when budgets are tighter, is that you want to prioritize those risks so that if you only have a certain budget to attack these risks in a given year, you want to attack them from what we have identified as your chief risk and then work your way down that list as far as you can.
Wow, so it's certainly something we hear so much about cybersecurity today, and there's so many different aspects to it. And our second question, what are the biggest cybersecurity risks that you see for your clients as we charge through the 2020s?
I think right now, Dave, we're in an interesting time for 2 chief reasons. Number one is the increased use of artificial intelligence, depending upon the organization, whether they're a commercial enterprise or a public enterprise, such as a federal or a state agency. Everyone is looking to leverage artificial intelligence. And again, depending upon the industry that you're in, or whether you're a federal agency or a state agency or a local agency, there's going to be rules and regulations that you have to adhere to formally if you choose to use artificial intelligence. So that's the primary reason. Another reason for this, Dave, is that because we've practiced now at an international level with the most discreet clientele in the world in financial services, healthcare, other industries, and for public entities, every great once in a while, the stars get aligned and there's a confluence of burgeoning compliance requirements that are put upon industry or are put upon a public entity at the federal, state, or local level. This is one of those times. So rather than work your way through these risk assessment criterias or these risk management frameworks, you need a formal advisory partner like we are to help you optimize your resources as you attack those, because each one of those is going to have a different standard of care and is going to have different requirements that are put upon you that you're going to have to adhere to in order to satisfy those individual requirements. So it's really twofold right now. So it's a particularly interesting time, Dave.
And now, just to clarify one point, You mentioned the significance of artificial intelligence. Does that make the job of cybersecurity more difficult? And if so, what's happening there?
It does, Dave. We have across industry and to some degree in public entities, as I've just referenced, elements of artificial intelligence has been used for more than a decade. Some of the viewers might be familiar with the phrase continuous monitoring. Well, in the cybersecurity world, continuous monitoring often utilizes elements of artificial intelligence and has for some time. Now we're at a point where in different elements of cybersecurity, whether it's a deepening of the use of AI in continuous monitoring or in other elements of cybersecurity, the use of artificial intelligence is on the rise. And so there are institutions that are already, and I know this because we are working with clients now that are in this category of critical infrastructure. Organizations are looking at frameworks such as the NIST artificial intelligence framework, or the ISO International Standards Organization artificial intelligence standard, in order so that they can produce artifacts that are leveraged within their environment to produce artifacts that are then shared twofold, Dave, with their internal users, whether it be investor relations or compliance or their legal community, and simultaneously use with their external stakeholders, such as their customers, their prospect customers, or their regulators. So there's a huge opportunity to develop a proper strategy based on these accepted new burgeoning AI frameworks and standards that we can apply for a client to help them satisfy any such requirements. And we're doing that today.
Fascinating stuff. And our third question today is, CNH has an impressive list of clients in many major industries. For our younger consultants hoping to follow in your footsteps, what do you recommend as an approach? How do you get rolling, and what should they be doing?
Well, the work that we do in the risk assessment discipline, Dave, is normally categorized today under what's termed governance, risk, and compliance. You'll often see the acronym GRC. So if someone was interested in moving into risk assessments, they would normally find those opportunities listed in the public domain under GRC, right? And normally the way that either private industry or a state or local or federal agency executes risk assessments is as part of a team. So normally a junior person would work in a role that they're found to be comfortable with, and then once they prove that they can formally execute all those responsibilities, like in most other disciplines, Dave, you move up in the ranks and your responsibilities are expanded upon. So that's the typical path in. I will tell you that from my own experience, Dave, what attracted me to the risk assessment world, and I hope my enthusiasm comes across, is that there's a level of rigor and there's a level of execution and the dotting of the I's and the crossing of the T's. You have to be very precise in this discipline to produce the requirements and the outputs that we do that are depended on by organizations like the Department of Homeland Security or a federal agency like Health and Human Services or the EU. These are some of the organizations that depend on outputs that either we directly contribute to or we produce firsthand. That's what's exciting about this discipline, sir.
Fantastic. And Ken, obviously we just touched the tip of the iceberg here. How can our audience get more information about you and your firm?
Well, they can look up Churchill and Harriman. Our website is C for cat, H for Harry, U for United, S for States.com. There's a lot of information on our website. And we also, including elements of risk assessment. For example, we recently did a webinar for the automotive ISAC, which really gets into some deep risk assessments that we've done for private industry and for government. So I would point people directly either to social media or to our website, Dave.
Very great stuff. And again, we really appreciate your being here today. No, it's not your imagination. When I talk about danger from all sides in this case, it is not Israel, it is the United States. A recent report by the U.S. Immigration and Law Enforcement, ICE, revealed significant numbers of illegal immigrants with criminal histories on ICE's national docket. The criminal histories on ICE's docket include high volumes of illegals convicted of homicide and sexual assault. The numbers along the southern border are stunning, but what has gone largely unnoticed is the record-breaking number of crossings over the northern border from Canada by individuals on the terror watch list. The border with Canada is huge, and much of it is untended due to the relatively light population in Canada and the fact that in the past, most of the bad news came from the Mexican border. A key finding in the ICE report is that under current processes, CBP and ICE cannot assure that they are keeping high-risk non-citizens without identification from entering the country. Additionally, TSA cannot ensure that its vetting and screening procedures prevent high-risk non-citizens who may pose a threat to the flying public from boarding domestic flights. Of course, separately, Americans know that fentanyl deaths in this country are totally out of control. The latest full year is 2023, and for the first time in U.S. history, fatal overdoses peaked above 112,000 deaths in just 1 year. This is young people and people of color are among the hardest hit. With such a lack of control, how serious is the risk posed to U.S. national security? Dem majority Federal Communications Commission helping George Soros fast-track takeover of a huge nationwide radio network. All Americans should be concerned about a proposed takeover of about 200 radio stations in the United States. The acquired stations tout 165 million monthly visitors. Many conservative radio shows are presently on these stations, including host Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, and Eric Erickson. To do so, Soros has asked the FCC to waive a current FCC rule that foreign company ownership of U.S. radio stations is not allowed to exceed 25%. Regardless of your political viewpoint, this many stations under control of one person or entity is bad for America's democracy and for freedom of the press. Houston, Texas, deputy on duty and her daughter killed by a driver who's reported to be drunk. This is a little bit off our normal track, but I'm an advocate for always driving sober. This is a sad story. It's an excellent example of why it is so important. At 3 a.m., 46-year-old Catherine Hudson, an 18-year Harris County sheriff, was working an extra job providing security for a construction crew. In the car with her was her 7-year-old daughter, Casey. They never made it home. As Omar Jose Alvarado, 23, crashed into their car and the vehicles burst into flames. He is charged with 2 counts of intoxication manslaughter. I was concerned about what penalty might apply. In Texas, this is punished by 2 to 20 years. However, if a peace officer was involved or 2 or more people, the penalties can be for a first-degree felony. As both apply here, I recommend the death penalty if found guilty, and if that cannot be applied, to be sentenced to life in prison without parole. People listening to this show are aware of my prior exhortations to never drive while impaired. There are so many options: taxis, Ubers, Lyfts, and just sleeping it off in your car. Today's show is dedicated to the memory of Deputy Hudson and her daughter Casey. Ignoring warnings, Beijing escalates aggression against the Philippines. China continues its aggression towards U.S. ally, the Philippines. It has harassed ships in waters controlled by the Philippines. All international authorities agree that those are Philippine waters. A more assertive and present U.S. force in the White House and overseas would likely have prevented this very dangerous situation from even developing. Remember, both world wars were started involving countries other than the other major powers being attacked. Third countries are being attacked by major powers, and then the other major powers step in to defend those countries, sooner or later resulting in involvement of many, many parties around the world and an incredible death toll. Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. U.S. bankruptcy filings continue to rise in the post-pandemic era. Many of us hoped that with the end of the pandemic, business would return to normal. Unfortunately, a new record has been established according to the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts. Annual bankruptcy filings totaled 486,613 in the year ended June 2024, compared with 418,724 cases in the previous year. This is a 16.2% jump over the previous year. Personal bankruptcy filings increased by more than 15%. However, business filings jumped by more than 40%. Bankruptcy filings have increased every quarter since June 2022. To blame has been the cost of capital, along with the cost of almost everything else. This is combined with the changing habits of retail customers. Some recent high-profile bankruptcies include Rue 21, Stop and Shop, Bed Bath & Beyond, The Body Shop, WeWork, Rite Aid, Party City, Conn's Appliances, Bob's Stores, Tuesday Morning, Joann Fabrics, and various discount retailers, including the 99-cent only stores. Of course, the 2 biggest recent bankruptcies were Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Sadly, experts in the field expect personal bankruptcies to increase in the foreseeable future, matching the business bankruptcies. Obviously, consumers are facing the same challenges, as the cost of almost everything has outpaced the rate of increases in income. And of course, a parallel story here is that many consumers are unable to purchase a house today due to high housing costs and high interest rates. Another factor for consumers is the layoffs paired with these business bankruptcy filings. And of course, for other businesses, they're cutting employees to avoid having to file for bankruptcy. Outplacement firm Challenger Gray & Chrisman indicated that just to the point in this year, U.S. firms announced plans to cut 434,645 jobs. Again, that's just up to this point in the year. Imagine what the annual layoff number may be. While economic forecasts are still fairly strong for the economy overall, it won't feel like that for those who are laid off. Federal court blocks expansion of Title IX to include gender identity. A federal court ruled in the case of Kansas versus United States Department of Education to block the Department of Education, also known as the DOE, final rule to redefine Title IX's definition of sex, slated to take effect on August 1. This was just the most recent case blocking the DOE rule in Kansas, Alaska, Utah, and Wyoming. Other plaintiffs included Moms for Liberty, Young America's Foundation, and Female Athletes United. These states joined 11 other states that already have obtained federal court orders blocking the new DOE rule. The legal argument was that the DOE's new rule exceeds its statutory authority under Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. The plaintiffs claimed that the rule's redefinition of sex to encompass gender identity and sexual orientation contradicted the original legislative intent and statutory language. Title IX was passed in 1972 and focused on protecting biological women from discrimination in higher education, including the classrooms, extracurricular activities, and sports. It also called for formal rules and procedures by covered institutions for dealing with allegations of discrimination. In the 50 years since it was enacted, it has helped to dramatically increase opportunities for women to enjoy participation in sports and other activities. Prior to Title IX, women were far behind men in both varsity, other sports, and extracurricular activities. Title IX has made a positive difference. The judge in the Kansas case stated, I quote, "The unambiguous plain language of the statutory provisions and the legislative history make clear that the term sex means the traditional concept of biological sex in which there are only two sexes, male and female." Importantly, this judge also applied the major questions doctrine, which means that if there is something major, it should be a result of Congress revising Title IX, not a federal agency. Note that this ruling is consistent with recent rulings of the U.S. Supreme Court, which are reining in these out-of-control federal agencies. Balancing this in a statement emailed to the Epoch Times, the DOE spokesperson said they were reviewing the ruling and added, Title IX prohibits sex discrimination in a federally funded educational environment. And continuing, the department crafted the final Title IX regulations following a rigorous process to realize the non-discrimination mandate of Title IX. The department stands by the final Title IX regulations released in April 2024 and will continue to fight for every student. While the appeals of previous rulings are pending, we have asked the trial courts to allow the unchallenged provisions, the bulk of the final rule, to take effect in these states as scheduled on August 1. The judge recently blocked nationwide the Biden administration's attempt to revise Title IX. U.S. District Judge Danny Reeves' ruling blocked the changes for the entire country, determining that the regulations exceed the administration's authority under Title IX, violate the Constitution, and are the result of arbitrary and capricious agency action. Up until that ruling, the changes barring discrimination based on gender identity were only blocked in a handful of states. Reeves also ruled the U.S. Department of Education's interpretation of what constitutes sex-based misconduct was too broad. Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Scammeni hailed the ruling. The court's order is a resounding victory for protection of girls' privacy in locker rooms and showers and for the freedom to speak biologically accurate pronouns. Folks, I have a suspicion this is not the end of this controversy. America's reckless Iran policy has the Middle East on the brink of war. This is from a special report from Fox News. During the Biden-Harris administration, the United States has freed close to $100 billion in Iranian assets. Now, that would be bad enough, but it has also attempted to renew negotiations on Iran's nuclear deal. But I really think that that's kind of a pointless deal at the moment, because they're so close to having a nuclear weapon. I don't think there's anything the United States can realistically do other than locating the facilities in Iran and bombing them. I don't think that's on the list for the next few weeks. Pandering to Iran has produced terrible results. On October 7, 2023, was the Hamas and Gazans' atrocity against primarily innocent civilians in Israel. This was funded by Iran. On top of this, Iran wants but Hezbollah on a regular basis has launched rocket attacks on Israel, hitting primarily civilian targets. The rockets were provided by Iran in any case. This amounts to over 170 U.S. bases and other assets being attacked. Despite being our only true ally in the region, the Jewish state is now in more danger than perhaps since 1948 when it was created. This is a failure of deterrence by the Biden-Harris policies in the Middle East. The peace observed during the Trump administration proves that a strong position against Iran definitely works. New Louisiana law requires 10 commandments be displayed in all classrooms. To be clear, religion has no place in an American public school classroom. However, the 10 commandments are basic civilization, not religion. What part of thou shalt not kill would require a religious reference? Of course, the ACLU is still around with an amazing $300 million budget. They have sued to stop the law. I call them the anti-American, anti-civilization, anti-liberty folks. I put these clowns in the same dumpster as the Southern Poverty Law Center. If organizations have outlived their usefulness, they need to be defunded. They need to be put out of business. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. And I think after you hear this interview with John Gardner, you're going to agree with me that he's part of the interesting people. He's a self-taught entrepreneur after 2 decades of experience in American manufacturing. After traumatic injury as a teenager, he dropped out of high school and left Ohio to pursue his dreams in California. He slept in his car, ate canned food, and worked at restaurants. At the age of 25, he started a business out of his apartment based on cutting tools that his father had engineered. By overcoming adversity with determination and tenacity, he now sells his product to the U.S. Navy, NASA, Lockheed Martin, Ford Motor, the FAA, and thousands of other companies. His first book is Manufacture Local, How to Make America the Manufacturing Superpower of the World. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I think many other Americans. We welcome John Gardner for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thanks for having me on, Dr. Schein.
It is our pleasure. As you know, we ask our guests 3 questions, and so we'll get started. So many people drop out of high school, wander off to California and elsewhere. They often end up in misery or working at a fast food joint, and there's some songs along those lines, of course. How did you change that direction in your own life?
Well, I was working in restaurants, but I picked the highest end ones to work in, and I really just wanted independence. And I had left Ohio, Pittsburgh area to pursue acting because I was raised without a TV and a phone. And then I got hit by a car and had brain surgery, traumatic brain injury, and was in the hospital in a coma for a while. And when I woke up from the coma, I was able to watch movies. And I kind of grown up in the library a lot, but as I was in the hospital, I saw Dances with Wolves and Last of the Mohicans. And as a kid, I read a lot of frontier stories, and going west was always the kind of dream, you know, of the American manifest destiny type stuff. And so I got to see Superman for the first time. I was like, wow, I want to be in this industry and tell stories. And I, dropped out of school and went out to LA and was very fortunate to meet some good people and found I didn't really like the industry. I found it to be quite boring standing around on set. I loved the people, just didn't like the business of it. And so I didn't know what to do next. And here I am without I kind of remembered that my dad had started a business out of his garage when I was a kid, 9, 10, and 11. And I worked in the garage on a World War II era grinding machine. And I think it really was my dad's example of, hey, you can just start selling a product. As long as you have a product to sell, you can start something in your garage. And I think we all look at business now, not we all look at business, but I think we look at big institutions as I can't ever penetrate that, or I can't ever do that unless I go up the corporate pathway. But my dad was a good example of just doing your own thing. He's an inventor by nature. So I think it was truly my dad's example of entrepreneurialism that planted the seed for me that made me even think that was possible. He shut that down, and he liked having 40 hours a week and a steady paycheck and health insurance. And he liked kind of the safety of that. He's more of an inventor. So he shut that down. I was mad at him as a kid because I was making good money working for him. But I believe that the answer is what really started me on that. What saved me was really my dad's example. And then also his ability to create products because of his engineering experience and make those products. And his example of watching him is really probably what, helped me be able to afford having a family in Southern California.
Just an amazing story. So your new book specifically addresses offshoring, as it is called. Instead of focusing on the positives, you describe some of the real downsides. Please share some of them with our audience.
Well, they're across the board. No nation has independence if it doesn't make its own products and it's reliant on its foreign adversaries for its basic goods. 90% of our medicine comes from overseas, and a lot of it is tainted and poisoning us. But we talk about the environmental aspect. You're shipping 7,000 miles on cargo ships, which burn raw crude oil. America has some of the cleanest environmental laws in the planet. So making stuff here is just cleaner for our country. But also national security. A significant portion of our goods for our defense industrial base are made overseas by our strategic adversaries. So that's just some of the common sense items, some that people already talk about. But the things that I've learned or noticed from my experience in the industry that isn't talked about is the human capital, the know-how. Just because you can have a drawing of something and engineer it well does not mean you know the processes to make it. I recently automated a machine shop I have lights out manufacturing, meaning it runs overnight while nobody's there, unattended. And the hurdles to that are immense. You always learn stuff in any new process. This was kind of proven by, I think it was the Undersecretary of Defense was talking about the Navy stopped making torpedoes for 20 years, from 1996 to 2016. And it took them, I believe it took them 2 years just to figure out how to make them again, because it was all new equipment, all new machines, all new personnel. Nobody knew how to make them again, even though they had the drawing. And I think it really showed, World War II was fought and won in 4 years. And it took 2 years just to learn how to make torpedoes again. So also, World War II was fought and won. We supplied our allies with massive amounts of manufactured goods. The Soviet Union, we supplied, the UK, we supplied with Liberty ships going up into the Arctic Sea. That was all done because we had civil manufacturing might that could be turned to military manufacturing in time of need. Right now, we don't have civil manufacturing might that can be turned. We do. It's just not as strong as it should be when we're relying on our foreign adversaries. So I think national security is the no-brainer, but also the human capital and how much time it takes to learn how to do something again is the most untalked about thing that is lost when we offshore as much as we have.
Incredible. And so our third question is, so okay, you've described the problem. I'm a true believer. I agree with what you're saying. What are some of the keys to getting manufacturing moving forward again in the United States? What do we need to do?
Well, we need to put American companies on a level playing field with foreign companies. And the number one way to do that historically, since the Babylonian Code of Hammurabi, is tariffs have been in use since then in recorded history. And I have a chapter in my book that says tariff is not a four-letter word, because when I first heard tariff back in, I was like, oh, aren't those bad? We've just been brainwashed to have a knee-jerk reaction that they're bad. But America funded itself with tariffs for 140 years. Income tax did not exist. Sales tax did not exist until the 20s and 30s. America funded itself solely through tariffs for 140 years, and during that time, we were able to build up our industries behind this protective wall that even the playing field between our nation and other nations. And we bought too hard into the unilateral free trade theory, meaning if you tariff us at 200%, we're still only going to tariff you at an average of 3.4%, which is our average tariff rate right now, which doesn't make much sense to me. Another way tariffs help American manufacturers is to drive large volume jobs back, and so that companies can take advantage of the most beautiful thing in the world, even more beautiful than compounding interest, in my opinion, which is economy of scale. Any manufacturer knows that when you make 5 parts, it's much more expensive than if you make 5,000 parts per part. And the reason why is all the programming, all the tooling, all the machines, all the training that you have to do for 5 parts, you can then spread that cost out over 5,000 parts. But because of cheap labor, slave labor, lax environmental laws overseas, large lot jobs, large volume jobs tend to be pushed overseas. But if we bring those large volume lots here, then the price of American-made goods will go down because they have larger volume and can spread that cost out. Americans need to be put on the same playing field. You also hear a lot of economists say, oh, American manufacturing needs to be automated. It needs to have robotic cells. Well, no manufacturer invests in robotics or automation unless they have a large volume, because you keep things, robotics and automation and lights out manufacturing is for large volume jobs, so you only do make that investment if you have the volume up front, and tariffs help drive the volume back here. So I could go on about this for a long time, but I don't know how much more time we have. So, I think, one recent way that, is tangentially related to the problems American producers face is, I saw this thing about hazelnuts, organic hazelnuts. And this organic hazelnut American farmer was trying to get the organic certification. He found Turkish hazelnuts were being labeled organically, and he tracked down these companies overseas. They went to blind trusts. Nobody knew if these hazelnuts were actually organic. Now, 100% of American companies that claim organic are audited by the FDA. Only 2% of foreign companies that claim organic are audited by the FDA. And so they can claim it, and it's never proven, and they can undercut American pricing because they don't have to follow the same standards that American manufacturers or producers and agricultural producers, in this case, have to follow. And I think having fair trade and tariffs are the leveling field for that. So those are just some of the things that the big dynamics I think can really kick things off for American manufacturers.
John Gardner, love talking with you. And again, we want to mention your new book, Manufacture Local: How to Make America the Manufacturing Superpower of the World. And there it is. Oh, in large format. Okay. And great thoughts, and certainly something that is being talked about a lot. We had a lot of interruptions with COVID, and because a lot of things were made overseas where some factories were totally
now the port strike. Now the port strike, who knows what's going to happen with that?
Absolutely. So it looks like a lot of your topics are going to become, if they weren't already front of mind, are going to become even more front of mind over the next few weeks. So we're delighted to have you. And so tell our audience, how can they get more information about you and your book?
Well, you can find my book on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles or bookshop.org. Just Google Manufacture Local, John Gardner, and it'll come up. And my email is John, JOHNG, author, AUTHOR, @gmail.com. John G. Author @gmail.com. And thanks so much for having me on, Dr. Schein. It's such a pleasure meeting you and talking to you.
And it is our pleasure. The United States, this is an oddball deal, has temporarily suspended safety inspections of avocado and mango shipments due to security concerns for its U.S. personnel inspectors in the Mexican state of Michoacan, the country's main avocado producing state. There were 2 employees of the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service of the U.S. Department of Agriculture were attacked and detained, folks. That's called kidnapping, while inspecting tropical fruit. They have since been released. That's awfully good to hear. I wonder if we paid money or a bribe to get that done. The absence of these inspectors mean that the produce from this important region of Mexico cannot come into the U.S. from that area. So they're predicting that mango and avocado prices may surge as a result of that. However, speaking as someone who buys groceries here in Houston, mangoes and avocados are on sale pretty much every week at least some supermarket. So I don't think it's that terrible. However, I have said Mexico is out of control. It is time to acknowledge that fact and seal the border. If Mexico cannot control its criminals and cartels, it's time for the U.S. to do it. The country is degrading into a third world joke. It's a dangerous joke for us. Now, I know, Mexico's a separate country. Their borders need to be respected. They don't respect our borders. We need to be safe, and we need to take care of business if Mexico will not do it. Well, our sore loser, Hillary Clinton, just won't go away. She's reportedly promoting a new book. Hey, you would have to be a hardcore sycophant to buy a book by her. Despite claims that the Dems are going to tone it down against Trump after his first assassination, she roared away immediately after this second attempt. But to throw rocks at Trump reminds me of the famed phrase, People in glass houses should not throw stones. She and her wandering buddy have such a long list of scandals that an NPR piece goes on for pages about the Clinton scandals. Perhaps some younger members of our audience are not familiar with some of them. Let's see: Whitewater, Travelgate, Paula Jones, Monica Lewinsky, Vince Foster's death, Filegate, the Benghazi disaster, which was made famous by her infamous statements about the death of the ambassador and the 3 brave men who tried to defend the embassy, the highly questionable finances and expenses of the Clinton Foundation, and the famous server with government material kept at her house, and the erasures of thousands of emails before she surrendered it. More recently, who could forget the ties to Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Clinton? So, in short, Hillary, nobody with any sense cares about you. You're a bitter old biddy. The European Union begins to lean right. French President Macron is in a major panic, and I love it, folks. Elections across Europe resulted in a surge of support for conservative candidates, sparking a snap election in France. Much of the push here was due to the fraud of climate change being forced on the population. That costs them money, costs them opportunities, increases their energy cost. Plus, the horrendous impact of unwelcome immigration. And of course, the United States has experienced that in droves, so we can commiserate with our colleagues in the European Union. In France, Marine Le Pen's national rally outpolled Macron's party 2-1. Yeah, folks, over 30% to about 15% for Macron. Similar results for conservatives are reported in Germany and Italy. This should be a message to the Dems here in the USA. You can't fool all of the people all of the time. A great source for news with a special slant on what's really happening in China is NTD, just 3 letters. They have a free newsletter with a near daily comprehensive report. They just released an article covering a new documentary film called State Organs. It was made possible since a political prisoner in China somehow escaped to tell the story of how China is harvesting organs from people whose religion or other principles do not match the Red China line. Shen Paiming, first known survivor of forced organ harvesting, made an appearance at the initial screening of the 76-minute film. The producer was Raymond Zhang, and it was scored by composer Daryl Bennett. It tracks 2 families searching for their missing loved ones in Red China. It revealed state-sanctioned forced organ harvesting. It's hard to believe that this can happen in the year 2024. Sounds more like another Holocaust situation. A pitch was made in the article to support legislation like the Falun Gong Protection Act. I doubt any American waiting for a transplant, no matter how desperate, wants to know that that organ was harvested from a Chinese political prisoner. Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.